Hello, welcome to the December 13th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm just going to do a quick audio test and then we will go ahead and get started. Bear with me just for a moment. All right, so my audio test sounds fine. My name is Greg Undo. I am the host of the live stream today. I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. Steinberg distributor. Adjust my microphone here a little bit. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance via email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you can simply ask your questions in the live chat field. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're using, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Artist, Elements, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system, that information is helpful. When asking questions, if you don't see an immediate response, one of the things you could do is just make sure we could try to avoid asking the same question repeatedly. At times, I will be behind the actual live question part. I'll try my best throughout the live stream to catch up. But if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could try to refrain from asking the same question again and again, that would be helpful. That just kind of slows down the whole process. We should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream put into the comments field and pinned to the top with timestamps. And if you wanted to search for other topics that have been covered in previous live streams, I think it's over 23,000 questions and topics that have been covered. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Agent K and Jazz Dude, so we want to thank them. They're not Steinberg employees. They're just wanted to make it a better environment for customers. And also another wonderful resource of information that's available, Jazz Dude does a lot of work with, is the Cubase Nation Discord. So special thanks to Jazz Dude again for that. Just a quick note, I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a question. First question. Hi, Greg. Greetings from Massachusetts. I think it's Worcester. Worcester or Worcester. I used to know how to pronounce that. Anyway, does it really matter how big is the latency buffer size if I record a guitar amp with direct monitoring? Would it be recorded with latency at 1024? So as you're recording, it's going to be recorded directly in time. When the latency can be a factor, when a higher buffer size can be a factor when tracking, is if you're monitoring the recorded signal back and you're using that as the basis for the performance. If you're recording it with direct monitoring enabled, that's not going to be a factor. So when you're in direct monitoring, what happens is the signal goes directly from the input to the output of the audio interface, so there's no added latency of the buffer size or effects that are on. So it's going to be recorded perfectly in time. So, but the latency is only going to be affected when we actually are tracking and monitoring through that in real time. So it's not going to be offset. You'll just record directly in the correct time. All right, so we see Chris Howlam from Athens, Georgia, and he has a question. What are the approximate ratios of low and high settings in Cubase's stock tube compressor? All right, so say if I put, I think I have tube compressor open here on this. So when we see the ratios for low and high, what I think this is, if memory serves me correct, is that this is kind of just an added gain stage to the compression. So it's not necessarily a traditional ratio, because a lot of tube compressors don't necessarily have a fixed ratio, but you could set the input and output. but I think that this would just give the actual signal a boost. So, and I think it kind of follows nomenclature of different like hardware units. So you just had a question come in by email. Let me see if I could get to it quickly and copy it down. All right, so we had a question. It was just mailed in from Gene. And his question is, Greg, regarding Cubase 12 Pro, when comping and a section is highlighted, how can the highlighted area be adjusted, or do you have to undo and try again? All right, so let me just open up a comping example. Thanks for sending your question in, Gene. I think I may have one. It should be... Okay, so let's say if we've done a comp on a particular event, so let's say we've done several comps and then we want to adjust the size of the comp. If you just go to the edge here, we'll see that the tool will change, and then you could just adjust. And now I have the snap on. I'll hit the letter J to take snap off, but if you just wanted to, again, just resize that particular event, we could choose new start and end times if you wanted to, or if we just wanted to make this a little longer, just go to the center edge, and then at that point we could just choose to resize, so you don't have to start all over again with that gene. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, great to see Ari checking in from Israel. And we have Ubakun checking in from Africa, so Nigeria, I believe. Sorry if I'm mistaken. All right, we have Patrick, and he says he's happy to be on live. Okay, so we see a question from Dallas LaRue. Isn't there another way other than free warp and hit points to automatically quantize a drum track to a bass track? Thanks, Greg. So yeah, I mean, once you have like, you know, the hit points, you know, you don't have to do it manually, but once you have hit points for both sources, so let's say if I come here and I just wanted to come over, and I'm not going to necessarily do this all at once, but we need to have kind of like a rhythmic basis for this. So say, okay, now I want to adjust my hit points here, and I want to adjust, you know, let's say I have my hit points here, and I'll adjust the threshold. So now when I go to, you know, a particular element directly here to that, we have the hit points. Now we could just come over and say, okay, I want to quantize this to eighth notes. And then once the audio warp is enabled, you could just, and I'll just come here just so we can see, we'll probably see the different elements change as we do that. So now each of those hit points will automatically just be quantized to be on the beat. So, you know, and it will just kind of use those particular hit points, and those hit points will be created by default as you record. You could go in and tweak them, but if you wanted to, like I didn't necessarily adjust the hit points on this particular file. Now, if we double click on it and we'll take a look in our event, we'll see that the hit points are there from the recording. And now if I hit quantize, that it will still quantize, but it may not be as accurate. So you don't necessarily, you know, by default, Cubase will find the hit points, and then you could just quantize like normal, but make sure that you have the audio warp enabled within the quantize panel. So let me know if that helps, Dallas. All right, wonderful to see Jan from Stockholm. All right, wonderful to have Kerwin Young checking in from Atlanta. All right, we have Peter from Montreal. All right, we have Mr. Dali67 from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. And we have Toon from Belgium joining us. We see Uno Memento from minus 25 degrees centigrade in Finland. So that's pretty cold. Good luck with the cold. All right, so we see from Patrick, Greg, show how to easily duplicate copy velocity. I saw you doing quantized panel, but if I do like the MIDI notes that are collapsed, is there an easy way? So let me just open a different project. Let's try this one. Okay, so I'll just... All right, so let's say I'll just make a copy. So we come here, we'll look at these notes, and we'll look at our velocities. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to, so it just says, show how to easily duplicate copy velocity. So you do it in a quantized panel, but if I do like that, MIDI notes are collapsed. Is there an easy way? So let's say I wanted to copy this over, because velocity is part of the note. So when we do go to the quantized panel here, I could just take this particular note over here, and let's say I wanted to adjust the position to 0 and the velocity to 100%. So now I double click on this note, and let's look at our velocities. Now I could choose to quantize the velocities, carry the velocities from this over to that event. So you could do it manually, but that's probably the fastest way to do it, is just kind of drag it in to make a quantized panel preset. And then at that point, set the velocity to 100%. You can set the position, you could set that to 0, and then just quantize with the particular velocity at 100%, and the velocities will be carried over. Let me know if that's helpful, Patrick. All right, so we have a question from YPE. Hi, Greg. How do I copy a MIDI part in the MIDI editing view? It's a piano part with no quantize. Cubase 12 Pro. All right, so let's say I have this event here, and I double click, and I'll just make this larger so we could see it. And let me just zoom. All right, so copy a MIDI part in a MIDI editing view. It's a piano part with no quantize. So if I wanted to copy like particular notes, I'm just going to hold down the Alt or Option key. And if I accidentally switched the, the particular notes here, if I moved it up, if I hit Control or Command, that way it will lock it. If I started moving it to the right, sorry, let me just select these notes and hold down the, so if I want to copy the data, just hold down the Alt or Option key. If I move this in time first, what I could do is just hold down, so let's say I accidentally moved it, I hold down my Alt key, and then I hit Alt or Option, and then I hit Control or Command, and that will restrain the direction so it's on the same particular notes. If you also wanted to immediately duplicate, you could just hit Control or Command plus the letter D, and you could duplicate directly within the MIDI editor like that as well. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, so we have a question from Mark Davenport. Please explain the difference between the clip gain anchor in the arranger window and a pre-gain slider in the mix console, and when to use one versus the other. All right, so when we look at our like channel views here, we could think of, when we look at our clip gain here, this is going to be global for everything. So when I would probably want to, you know, if I was just doing editing, I may want to just quickly grab this, or let's say one note is a little too loud. I could come in and just grab one note. So here I could do it on just small sections. So if I say, you know, I want, you know, like this breath was annoying me, I could just take this and do it on one particular section. Whereas this, when I do it in the pre-gain switch, that will be global. So we can think of, they'll kind of do the same thing, but this has more, you know, the clip gain on the event has more flexibility in that you could just do it to multiple events simultaneously, or you could just take one portion of a particular event and kind of adjust the gain like so. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. We have Matt Elston checking in from a cold UK. Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right, we have John Drinkall saying hi to everyone. Thanks for joining us. And John Barry is joining from the English Riviera. All right, we see Jazz Dude, faithful attendee. Thanks for all your efforts. All right, and we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Hope you're doing okay. Watching all these tornadoes go through. I saw Weatherford, Texas on the Weather Channel this morning as tornadoes were passing over. So we hope you're safe. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Greg, is there a way to make my vocal as choir, GAND, maybe grand choir? If not, can I get a choir sample, and can I sample that with the Cubase sampler? So one thing to you know, just be aware of. So let's say if I wanted to, there is a plugin that could help out with this. So let's say, and so it's a plugin, it's under modulation called Cloner. So probably getting a choir sample may not give you the same exact, may not give you kind of like turning a single voice into multiple voices, but I'll just load up a quick project here. All right, so let me just send a quick MIDI reset here. All right, so if I want to take my lead vocal and I'll just do this as an insert, we could do it as a send as well. So if we go under modulation, so you see one called Cloner. What did you say? So this is so what this is, it could take kind of like 4 different voices. You were the party, the big event. I was your everything. Now I'm uninvited. So single voice. I'm on the outside looking in. So this way you could have 4 different voices with different pitch shifting, slight pitch shifting, and slight delays, and you can kind of play around with that. So I would, that's often a kind of a common solution for taking a single voice and making it sound a little wider in a particular project. So I would give that a try, the Cloner plugin. All right, so we see from And X says, I want to buy a few updates. Cubase Pro 11, important. And I don't need Cubase Pro 12. I want to buy a few update Cubase Pro 11. So, currently we don't sell updates to older versions. But if you did upgrade to Cubase Pro 12 from a previous version, I think it will take your e-licenser and give you a Cubase Pro 11 license on that. That's available for your e-licenser, and then when you go to activate it, your Cubase 12 license will still be there. But that upgrading to Cubase 12, I'm pretty sure gives you the Cubase Pro 11 license on your e-licenser that could be utilized. But, generally it's not where, we sell versions of Cubase 7 still new. So. All right, so we see a question, how do you quantize time in Nuendo 12? So not sure what quantizing time means, but if we wanted to kind of adjust the time of particular events, and this would be the same in Cubase or Nuendo. So let me just find, one of the things you could do is using time warp. So I'm not sure if this is what you wanted to accomplish, but we just find, we'll do it this file. But if we wanted to, move the time to fit events, we could come over here. So say, okay, I have my bars and beats, and with my warp tool, and we'll say warp grid, I could just say this is where measure 42 starts. This is where, measure 42. This is where measure 43 starts. And we could move the time to align directly to the musical grid here. So I could say, okay, let's just grab this measure and move it. I want, measure 41 to be here, measure 40 to be here. So, and this would adjust the tempo. So let me know if that's what you mean by quantizing time. But generally, things are quantized against a grid. With time being as kind of the foundation, so we don't generally quantize time, but let me know if that is helpful. All right, so we have a question from YPE, and in the same field, how do I increase or decrease velocity of a single note that is a bit hidden in other notes? Okay, so let's say if we have like a chord that's going on. So sometimes when we're dealing with kind of piano parts, so let's say if we look at this and we have a number of voices that are going on here. So we look at our velocity and we don't know which velocity is here. So if you hold down Control or Command plus the Shift key, you could adjust the velocity on just an individual note, just like that. So if you see it kind of within a chord, you could also just select the note and you'll see the velocity indicated here. You could use your mouse scroll wheel to increment or decrement like that, but try holding down. And this is a common request we get. It's like, it's an epiphany moment for a lot of people with editing velocity on chords where all the notes are stacked. Just hold down Control or Command, and then you could just hover over the particular note and adjust the velocity like that. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, great to see Benny checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see that Soren is also checking in from Sweden. It says this COVID is a mild apparently, but tough anyway. So we hope that you continue to recover. So thanks for joining us. We'll give you some aid and comfort for your COVID recovery. All right, so we see Sable Winters joining. She was like number 17. So if you do learn a new tip or trick, and make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, so we have Spin Doctor UG checking in from Uganda, from Gulu in northern Uganda. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Tune, it just says 2 questions. Sometimes the chord track refuses to get chords. Okay, it says, so, if we wanted to, so sometimes, I get this from some people, maybe, a chord technically comprises of 3 notes, but let's say if I just wanted to take this, there are some different settings that you could use. So if you're doing like create chord events, so you can make sure that you could ignore notes that are shorter than a particular value, but also if you wanted to interpret bass notes. But as we do this, we can see that, the chords will automatically be carried over. So, but let me know if your parts are doing it just like that, and what little interpretive flags that you have checked. All right. So we have another question from Tune. Is it possible to hide deactivated tracks in the chord track menu? At this moment, I see 100 inputs of disabled tracks using my template. Okay, so let's say if we have, let's say if we deactivate this particular track. Okay. So it looks like it's still going to be there, but if maybe if you don't want it to go to see that, maybe you could just choose to have it work only on monitored tracks. So, but currently it looks like all the tracks are still available for monitoring selections, but I'll make sure to pass that along to the team. All right, so we have Jackshot Records checking in from Western Canada, from British Columbia. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see it's -12 centigrade in Stockholm from Jan. All right, so we see from Patrick, why doesn't Cubase use Control D for velocity? It'd be really easy, but I want to know what's the reason behind saving on quantized panel and doing things, so, the intention is that within the quantized panel, we have something like that. So, Control D is a very common, for, duplicate. So, there's people who use that keyboard shortcut, thousands of times a day to duplicate events. But a lot of times, it's when we deal with velocity, it's, we can't just duplicate the velocity. It's hard to duplicate the velocities because it's going to always be a velocity is a component of a MIDI note message. So, but once you kind of have the velocity extracted, you could just simply, again, just choose to quantize it. But, Control or Command D is, a very common used function within the program for, for duplicating, which is probably more commonly used than for duplicating just velocities. So you could probably do it in, maybe a logical editor. Let's see if we could. take a look in the logical editor. So you might be able to extract the velocities here. Copy. Yeah, so it's gonna, yeah, it does look like copy and paste with that works. But again, realize that, you can't necessarily have a velocity without a corresponding MIDI note message. All right. So Soren just says, I missed a possibility to use elements and help my friend with some questions. The last one he asked were about making MIDI notes from hit points. Can it be done in Cubase 12 Elements, he asked. I don't have a license of Cubase 12 Elements. I'll see if I could get one for Friday's live stream, but it's going to come up, and I just have only a pro license for Cubase 12. So sorry about that. But you could see, if there are hit points on, if it is available, where to find the hit points, it would be kind of in the same spot. So if we wanted to just go to hit points here, and then see if there's the create tab and see if you could just create MIDI notes from there. Maybe if someone else has an Elements license, unfortunately I just have a Cubase Pro license, but I'll try to get one. It's come up a couple times. Sorry about that. All right. So we just see from ABC Do Beat Making question. Hello, are you making new script for Kai MPD 232 and an Arturia Mini Lab 3 MIDI controllers? That it's the companies themselves that are making the actual scripts. So, but let's take a look in the MIDI remote and. So we can see, so the MPD 32 is, I think that's just pads, and but they're easy enough to make for your own on your own. So let's say the Arturia, and we have the Mini Lab Mark II. So I'm not sure if that is very similar. But most of these scripts have been provided by the manufacturer, so you could always check with the manufacturer or choose to make one for yourself. Okay, so we have a question. Hi from the UK. Using Cubase 12, is there a built-in tools to help create melodies, much like chords? What is the easiest way to create interesting chord progression sequences? So there isn't necessarily, there isn't necessarily like an automatic melody generator. I think all those are, a little tend to give this very similar results. But if you have a particular, let's say if we wanted to go into like, our scale assistant, we could come over here and say, okay, we want to automatically snap pitch editing. So if you're, many times when you come here, now I'm not going to be able to, play a MIDI note or move a MIDI note to be out of key. But for melodies, it's totally fine to have accidental. So there's nothing that really does kind of automatic melody generation. Now, when coming up with interesting, and the second question is, what's the easiest way to create interesting chord progression sequences? All right, so, one of the things that once you start working with this, so let's come over here. All right, so say, okay, I want a G major, and let's say I do a typical, let's say a D. All right, and let's say I want to do something different in the middle. So if you go to the chord assistant, at this point, we could look at this based on proximity. And if we have, let's say, just a quick Rhodes patch here, so say, so the farther you're out, the less kind of close you are harmonically to the chords and the tonal center. But you could also do kind of circle of fifths and just kind of audition different chords. And I think, it's really easy as a songwriter to get into, especially like chord progression ruts. So just try some different things that maybe you wouldn't expect. Come over here and just try, an F minor chord, may be good, or an F sharp minor chord. Like I was just teaching my son how to play Sir Duke on bass. And it's, when you think about it, like in the chorus, it goes from like, it's in B major, and then all of a sudden, like the second chord in the chorus is an F minor, which is a chord that you probably wouldn't think to do. And you look at all the music theory books, and no one would suggest that, but it still sounds great. So, try different chords using the chord assistant functions. And then you could come up with some interesting stuff that you probably wouldn't have tried before. All right. All right, so we have Mark Cullen checking in from Pennsylvania. So just asking what's going on today. So we're just sitting here answering questions that people have in their Steinberg products. And thanks for joining us. And I have a lot of family from northeastern Pennsylvania. So welcome. All right, wonderful to see Fred Robinson from Norwich in the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we see a question from Dallas LaRue. When dissolving a whole audio drum kit to MIDI, it defaults to C1, the kick. Is there a more practical or easier way without painstakingly going through each part and assigning them individually? So if you're going through, let's say we have this, and, we can think of this as being just kind of a monophonic technique. So, the intention is, okay, I have my drum kit selected here. So, we want, this is going to be ideally done one element at a time. So let's say now I wanted to go to my MIDI notes, and I think it just defaults to whatever it is in the project. So, I wouldn't do kick and snare and hi-hat all at the same time. So I would do my kick, and let's say I go to snare. So, in here, I think it makes sense to intentionally set the MIDI note, because depending on what your source and what samples you're using and what MIDI device responds to it, a D1, could be a snare on one drum kit, and it could be a third kick on a different drum kit. So I think it makes sense that you intentionally assign the particular MIDI note so that it's going exactly where you want it to go. All right, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right. So question, can you quickly enlighten me more about how to mix surround 5.1 with stereo speakers or headphones? So if you're going to be doing 5.1, 5.1 is going to be, a fixed number of channels. So it's not kind of object oriented. Whereas Dolby Atmos, so with 5.1, if you wanted to do that, then you would have to, you have your 6 speakers. So, because 5.1 is actual discrete. Now, if you're working with Dolby Atmos, one of the things you could do is, let's come over to, so Atmos is probably more contemporary, but it's not, it's a different technology where the number of speakers are set to be kind of dynamically allocated for the monitoring environment. So if you wanted to do an Atmos mix in 5 and have that work in stereo speakers or headphones, once we get this set up and you go to kind of the ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos, but here you'll see in the plugin that's kind of automatically created, you can choose the down mix to binaural. So if you have headphones on, we can now take these different sources. So I'll open up this channel. We'll go to the panner. That we could move this around in a 3D sphere. So, but that's Dolby Atmos, where this is an object, and this object can go and kind of map to whatever different monitoring system. But in a traditional 5.1, you would need to have 6 speakers, 5 speakers of the same type and an LFE or subwoofer. Okay. All right. So we see question, how to remove vocal voice in waves file. Spectral layers can't working. What can I do? All right. So let me just import a quick file. All right. So we'll just take a two track mix and we just do this on a new project. It's not set up for Atmos. Sorry about that. And I'll just import a 2-channel mix. All right, so I would have. All right, so say we want to take the vocal out of that, so we would go here to extension. I'm going to say spectral layers. So with your Cubase license, since 11, you get spectral layers 1, and that will allow you to do vocal removal. If you have Spectral Layers Pro, you could remove other instruments, but we would want to come over to Process, and then you'll see, let me see if it's under Layer, rather, and we could say, let's unmix stems. It may say unmix vocals, but I'm just going to come over here, and let's choose to... We'll hit OK. So we're just going to extract the vocals from this particular track. Give it just a second here. Let it do its magic. I often describe this process as kind of taking the eggs out of a cake after it's been baked. Almost there. So again, Spectral Layers 1 that comes with Cubase will allow you to take the vocals out. And if you have Spectral Layers Pro or Elements, you can take out additional elements. So let's say now we're going to listen to it. So now it's taken the vocals and it kind of placed it into its own layer. So if I wanted to mute, and now if I wanted to just drag the vocal file out, we could do this. And if I say, okay, this is too loud or too soft, so once again, just kind of select it, make sure that you go to extensions here, and you can load up Spectral Layers. Once that is loaded in, you could just come over here to unmix stems or unmix vocals. It might be labeled in Spectral Layers 1, might be slightly different, and then just do its process. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. What are the main differences, advantages using Cubase 12 Pro or Dorco for Elements for notation? So, we can think of Cubase 12 Pro as being more, an overall production environment that has notation as well. And it's going to be probably taking the perspective of, like when you first open it up, you're going to see a project window that's going to have parts. We could look at those parts as notation. But when we start in Dorco, you start with kind of a blank staff, and then you could add notes in. So if you're doing more kind of traditional notation, like, traditional composition where you're starting with a blank staff and you want to write notes in or enter them in with your MIDI keyboard or through, different entry processes, even kind of playing it. But if you wanted to, and while you can do more kind of MIDI editing stuff in Dorco, this is kind of the primary work screen that we'll see in Cubase, whereas Dorco may start off with, you're starting from this perspective and often entering in notes directly from that perspective. So they could both kind of get you there, so obviously Dorco is more of a dedicated notation tool. And then, while Cubase has great notation capabilities for a DAW, there's things notation-wise that you're going to do in Dorco that aren't available in Cubase, and vice versa. So it just really depends on your perspective when you're starting it. So if you want to start from this as a composer, Dorco is probably a better perspective. They're both, and if you want to start with a project window and see like your time and incorporate audio files, then Cubase is going to be a better solution. So they're both viable options, and that's why people will work both ways, and they're both wrong and they're both right. So that's why Steinberg offers solution to either use case. All right, so we have RT Music just saying, hi, my first Cubase live stream. Hope you're all well. Thanks for joining us, and feel free to ask any questions that you want. All right, we have Grant Nicholas from Baltimore checking in at the gym. Thanks for being on, Grant. I hope you're well. All right, my chat field just jumped. Sorry. See, I have lots of questions in my future. Let me see if okay, so let me just adjust my microphone real quick here. Hang on. right. All right. So you see from Patrick says, yes, I did the same. But can you show the key editor, copy velocity, and paste it to different MIDI instrument? Does it affect any MIDI notes? Because I do my MIDI notes collapsing. Can you explain? Okay, so we'll take a look. So let's say we have this. So let's say we'll have this as our velocity curve on this. So I'm going to open up, drag this over. All right, so let's say I will take all of these notes, and let's say if we move them around, and now we will go ahead and quantize this. So, if it's going to be kind of, the same, so ideally you'd want kind of the same rhythmic capability, but we say, Patrick, when you mentioned the MIDI notes are collapsing, if you could maybe explain that in a different way, that'd be helpful for me. All right, we see Michael Teams is granting virtual ice creams to everyone. Thank you, Michael. All right, so Artsy Music, how to best capture the groove of a drum recording and use on a MIDI part. Okay, so let's say if I have a MIDI part here, so let's say I'll just draw in some quick 16th notes, and let me just all right, so I'm going to just go ahead and go to my hit points here. All right, so we're going to figure out exactly. So I'm going to take kind of the feel of this groove. So we'll double click, and this would launch us into sample editor and select hit points. So I want to find kind of the different rhythmically significant points. So we could just say, okay, I wanted to include that. And then we could say create groove. All right, so now when I'm here, I'm just going to switch my position to, and let's say we have all 16th notes. So now that I have selected from the sample editor, again, we'll see create, and we'll see groove. So we'll double click here, and now I'm going to quantize, and we can see that the groove from this drum loop has automatically been applied. So again, from the original source, double click to launch the sample editor, set your hit points where you want it, create groove. It's going to show up in the groove quantize presets, and you can save that as a preset, select your MIDI, and then quantize as normal. Make sure that you have position set to 100%, and then you should be all set with that. Let me know if that's helpful, and thanks for joining us again. Hope to see you on future live streams. All right, so we see Got Your is on the live stream. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see question. Cubase 12 Pro will not play imported video files, correct format. It just freezes. How do I fix this, please? Help. All right, so realize that when you say the correct format, that, if you have like an MP4 file, there could be 10,000 different MP4 file types depending upon the codec and the container. So just make sure, and if we just say, I'll just do a quick search here, say video support. All right, so you're going to see the video support, and this is just a help center article. So realize again that, it's not like a standard WAV file where it's, WAV file is going to play in anything that can play a WAV file. So if you have an MP4 file, you need to make sure that's an H.263 or H.264 codec. If it's a different codec, then you can get a utility just to actually convert that particular, codec, and it could be something like Handbrake. There's a number of different utilities, and all they do is convert one codec of a video file to another. So just because it's MP4, that doesn't mean too much, because an MP4 is a container and a codec is critical to get those matched up. So once again, just look for video support in Steinberg products, and then you could find a chart there of which container works for which codec. And I see Jazz Dude was kind enough to post the particular the link to that. All right, so we have John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I tried to bounce a comped track, then render in place, but neither reproduced a fade in before the first note. What have I missed? Okay, so let's go ahead and try it. All right, I'll just revert this. Okay, so let's say we're going to do kind of a comp on this. So just grab my comp tool. Okay, so now I'm going to close the lanes, and let's say I'm going to do just fade ins, and let's do a fade out here. Okay, so I'm going to now come over and go to audio, and we'll choose bounce selection. It looks like the fade ins and fade outs were automatically retained. So let's just do kind of a monster fade in to make sure. So once again, it could be maybe just selecting, instead of selecting the lanes, that we choose to come over. So let's say I'll make this super loud, and let's do a fade in on this particular event. So make sure that you select all of the different parts there. And so let's say we'll do, and I'll just do a kind of a fade out on all the clips. And then when I come over here, so again, I'll just select all these, audio to bounce selection, and we'll choose replace. Then we could see all of those fade outs kind of automatically carried over. So let me know if I did something differently, but it could be that maybe, John, that you had to select all the events that you want to bounce as opposed to a single event there, but it seemed to work. But let me know if I did something differently than you did. And thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. See, so Grant Nicholas says he uses Cloner a lot, and Jazz Dude just says Enya. So, yeah. All right. All right. So we see from got your render in place does that weird thing with multi outputs, where if I have 8 outs of Halligan, it will create 8 tracks per single instrument. I made an arranger. What is the trick to stop that? So realize that if you have a rack, so let's say I come over here and I'm going to go to my VST, all right, and I'm going to add an instrument rack, let's say Halligan Sonic SE. Okay, now it's going to create a MIDI track. And let's say when we go to the mix that I have, these particular outputs enabled. So say I have 4 outputs. All right, I now draw in notes. All right, so now I want to do a render in place. Now, if it's a MIDI track, Cubase doesn't really know where that MIDI track information is being sent to. So in order to make sure that it's included when we do a render in place, and there's multiple outputs, so we'll go to my render settings. We'll say, okay, let's go to my channel settings, and we'll hit render. That's going to render all of the outputs, even if nothing is there, because that's how MIDI tracks work, because Cubase doesn't know from the MIDI track where it's going. Now, if we do a different scenario where we start with an instrument track, so let's say we'll do Hallian Sonic SE. And again, we'll go to my mix. And we'll just draw a note in. So now when we go to render in place, the same settings. So let me just come here to this, and we can just go to my render in place settings. So, so I think it's usually instrument tracks won't print that, but it just seems like it just did it for me. But, if you don't have different, let me see if we have other ones here. So I think it's usually that if we have those outputs defined. So now let me just render in place one more time. So I'll just say, okay, let's get to render with current settings. But I think it's, try what I would try, and it seems like it's not working for me now. But I think if you do it with an instrument track, I think I'm probably just having a brain cramp on it. But try doing an instrument track and see if that makes a difference for you. I think it will. So sorry about my brain cramp. All right, so we see from PZ136 says, got a problem with Cubase, keeps crashing after latest update. Is there a way to roll back to the July release, which is very stable? I think you could find it on the Steinberg website. If not, let me know, and I could probably get it downloaded if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. But if you could let me know if there's any particular things that you're finding unstable, that would be helpful too, and we could maybe get it sorted out. All right, so we see Grant Nicholas just says he loves the latest Cubase update. Okay, so we see from Zounds by Timo, it says, I am using the right format for the video. It was playing before, didn't change anything. Say project, open next day, now video won't play. If there's if you have the possibility of maybe sharing the video with me, then I would be happy to kind of take a look at it. But make sure that you didn't have any. One other thing to check if it's not playing back is maybe to see if the frame rate of the project had changed. But if you go to project setup, maybe you could try to select get frame rate from video and make sure that the frame rate in the project didn't change. All right, so we have Bruce checking in from CMU Valley. Thanks for joining us. And if you want to, again, share the video to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. All right, so we see from PZ136 it says, and my licenses are screwed up for my Guitar Amp Classics. I don't know where the license is. I think they came with UR824. So the Guitar Amp Classics, those did come with the UR824. So it could be a software e-license, or it could be I'm not sure if it's on, it can work as a soft e-license. So it could be on a USB e-licenser if you chose to put it on a USB e-licenser. So maybe if you remove that, and if for some reason like you reformatted your drive, you could just do a search on the Steinberg site for reactivating soft e-licensers, and then you could get a new soft e-license if it's not showing up. But check in your actual check in your e-licenser, because that's where those licenses would reside. All right, so we see Eddie on drums, Clark saying he's in, so that's good. All right, so I just see from Orly, just says quarantine time is to aligning tracks to be in corrected rhythm. I guess Hit Points does that. So, the quantizing will allow you to do that, but it's going to kind of use the hit points as the rhythmic basis to move the audio transients. So again, if we wanted to come to, let's say we go to this audio without hit points enabled, that's going to be kind of the rhythmic basis for where we do the quantization. So if I wanted to quantize this particular loop to straight 16th notes, so now when I quantize, everything would be perfectly on, but that may not get you the musical results that you're looking for. All right, so we have Robotic on. So thanks for joining us. All right, we have Mark Winslow wishing us aloha from Hawaii, joining us from there. Thanks for being on. All right, so we just have a question. How to make use of markers when mixing? Okay, so let's say if we had a project. So a lot of times, you could use, you could have 10 different marker tracks. So you can use them, in a lot of creative ways. So let's say you're mixing, and let's say, you want to use your markers here. So I will just kind of open up, let me activate the project. And I'm just going to open up my mixer. So let's say you're listening and you want to make like notes during your mix. At this point, you can say, so let's say listening to it here. So it's like, okay, I want to drop a marker in at the beginning, and we'll just call this clean up buzz. So it's like, okay, this is where I want drums to come in. So, I could just come here and say, okay, this is where the verse comes in. So we could put different parts of the song, or like I say, at this point, work on gate. So you can make different mix notes as you're doing this, and then immediately jump to those particular parts of the song. So, maybe one, of the 10 marker tracks could be used for, okay, verse, chorus, bridge, solo. So you could quickly navigate. And another one could be just for like notes as you're listening to it for touching up the mix. And you could use a separate marker track to indicate those. All right, so we see Fred Robinson just says, woohoo, I didn't know the velocity adjustment trick. Thanks, Greg. Is always messing with the vertical velocity bars beneath. You can still do that if you want, but it's probably a little better. All right, so you see, greetings, Mr. Greg. A friend sent a song for me to work on it better. How can I separate the voice from the beat, please? So I just showed that just a couple minutes ago, but just real quick in case you missed it. I know there's a delay, but within spectral layers, all you have to do is, let's see if I still have the project open. Yeah, so within spectral layers, so you have spectral layers 1, which is part of, I think, Cubase Artist and Cubase Pro, but you want to install that, and then you'll see it come up as under an extension. And then you go to layer, and you'll see unmix vocals, or unmix, here it's called unmix stems, and then you could just do that vocal and unmix there. We just showed that, but if you need me to show it again, but just for time's sake, we won't necessarily duplicate. All right, so just see from Odd, basic question. When Cubase 12 crashes during a VST Connect Pro recording session and I try to reconnect with the client, I get a message, already connected with client. Seems like the server doesn't notice a crash and thinks the session is still going. I have to wait 30 minutes until the Steinberg server finally cancels the connection due to server timeout. I don't see any way to manually reset the connection to server, or am I missing something? I don't know of a way to do that as well, but maybe if the person you're recording, make sure that they exit out of the VST Connect Performer, and if they're logged out, that may stop the session as well. So, but let me know, Odd Basic, if the performer is actually, if the performer is actually, closed out of VST Connect Performer on their end. Okay, hang on. I just had an email just popped in. Give me just a second. I need to respond to real quick. All right. So we have a question from Tommy Valenko. Hi, Greg. Is it better to gain staging with is it better to gain staging with channel pre-gain or rather with normalized track to certain peak or rather LUFS? So I would generally, like on a particular track, if I had to do pre-gain, I would maybe choose to do it at this point because realize that when you normalize, that may affect the dynamics within a particular track. I may normalize as a last step if you wanted to get to a specific LUFS level. So, but I would probably do the pre-gain either directly on the event or from within the channel setting there first. All right, so we have Michael Pierce joining us. I think he's going to Amsterdam, to Netherlands this week. Thanks for joining us, Michael. All right. All right, so we see from Robotic, how to enter system exclusive parameters when creating a panel for a MIDI instrument. Okay, so let's come over here. I haven't done this in a while. But let's go to so we'll go to our MIDI device manager, and let's say we want to we'll install a device, we'll define new. Okay, I want it to be all right, in global settings, we'll enable the SysX parameters here. Okay. Okay, so open a device. We'll say for channel 1, let's add a panel. We'll make it spectre size. Okay, let's throw a knob in. All right, and now let's see if we go to create. And then at this point, you'll see the create SysX, and then you could just add the SysX stream directly in there. So once again, once you go to the panel, we can give it a background if you want, carry over a knob. We're going to select channel 1 and then double click on it and then click on create SysX, and then you should be able to put in the SysX stream directly there. So give that a shot. All right, so in Nigeria, it's 32 degrees to 35 degrees centigrade. Ubikun says it's always hot there. So, all right, so we have a question from Kevin Juhar. When would you use the beat calculator instead of the warp tool for lining up audio to a tempo? So a lot of times I would use the beat calculator for, let's say, if I had just come over, let's say, a new project, and let's say I don't know what the tempo is of a drum loop. So let's say I randomly made a beat and, we don't know what the tempo is, and let's say it's not in a particular name. So let's say I dragged this over and I needed to know, so a lot of times I use the beat calculator just for like maybe a single loop or a single event. So when I come here, I'll just take this out of musical mode. So I'm just going to listen to it and count the beats. So we'll say, and let me just start again without it muted. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. So we have 8 beats. So if I didn't know what the tempo was, at this point I could just say, we'll go to our beat calculator, and we could also do tap tempo in here. So, and we'll say, okay, it's 8 beats long. Then I can see that this is going to be 104.77 beats a minute. So, for the most part, I would, if I was dealing with a single file and I wanted to know what the tempo of that was, then I would make sure that I would probably approach it from the beat calculator. if I wanted the events to follow to the existing grid or find kind of multiple tempo variations on a particular in a particular project, then I would use like the tempo detection and the warping and a warp tool for that. Thanks for the question, and thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we have Shunya ED Music checking in from India. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. In a MIDI event where the notes don't go all the way to the end of the bar, is it possible to use Command plus D to copy and paste that MIDI file to the start of the next bar and not directly after the first MIDI note? So not within the editor, but if we wanted to do something similar, we could, if you wanted to do that, we could do it in the in-place editor. So I've been kind of lobbying for, having the ability to like have a range tool within the MIDI editor itself. But let's come over here and show you some stuff. Okay, so let's say I want it. Okay, so let's say I wanted to duplicate this, and I'll just, come here, let me just, instead of resizing it, I'll just, okay, so the problem gets to be within the MIDI editor. If I wanted to duplicate these notes, it's going to duplicate only the selected note. So if I have silence at the end, where if I wanted this to go directly onto the next beat and I hit Command or Control plus the letter D, it places it directly after the particular event. So that's not what is wanted. So, but if we go to the in-place editor, which we could use Control or Command plus Shift plus the letter I. So once we have this turned on, we could use the range tool. So I'm going to say, let's make our range, and I'll just make this kind of snap to the grid here. So let's say, okay, we'll have this range. So I'm just going to say for measure 17. So now that I selected the range and not the events, I could duplicate, and that would automatically kind of place it directly on the grid. So you have to just Control or Command plus Shift and the letter I for in-place editor, and you could use that same keyboard shortcut to open and close. Then select with the range tool, select the range that you want duplicated as opposed to the MIDI notes, and then you could duplicate on the grid. I know it's kind of a workaround, it's a pain. I've been complaining about it for a long time. Hopefully we'll see changes coming in the future. All right, so Shunya ED Music just says his name is Shiva. So thanks for being on today and welcome. All right, so Michael Pierce just says, hi Greg, just wondered, had a lot of crashes in Cubase 12 this week, probably third-party stuff. But how useful are the log files to Steinberg? So they do go through them, and especially if you have like a support case, if you reached out to them for support, they could have access to all of your crash logs. So yeah, they are helpful. All right, so we have a question from Irving Novello. Says, hi Greg, I hope you're great. How can I deactivate my APC Mini MIDI controller to control the mixer? I need to use it only for expression on my orchestral libraries. Thank you. All right, so if we want it to go to like the MIDI remote, so let's say I wanted to get rid of, deactivate this in the MIDI remote and just use those particular faders for different expressions. So we'll come over here, and once it's selected, so we'll in our MIDI remote area, and then just come over here and from the little drop down menu and just choose to disable script, or you could just come over here and delete it if you wanted to, and then you would be kind of all set. So just click right here, and then you could just delete the script or to disable it. So try that. All right, wonderful to see Spy Girl on. All right, so we see from Shiva, it says, hi, don't know if it's a bug. Whenever I import AIFF, everything comes to mono. So it could be that, I'm not sure if every AIFF file would do that. So, but let's say if I, but make sure, so let's say if I wanted to take this and let's export it. There's a lot of programs that may automatically split stereo interleave files into mono. So if that's the case, then, but let's say if I wanted to export this as AIFF, all right, and I'm just going to put this on my desktop. We'll do stereo out and make sure that I'll just solo this particular track here. All right, so we're going to do this as an AIF file. So I just happen to do it as real time to make it even more long. Okay, so I'm going to do a new project here. And let's go ahead and import the audio file. Let's get to the desktop. All right, let me just check my export settings again. Okay. All right. All right, so you can see that that's automatically maintained the stereo interlead. Also, make sure that when you go to preferences and we go to editing to audio, you can make sure that split channels isn't checked right there. And on importing audio files, we could, make sure that split channels isn't active, but make sure that the source that you're getting the AIFs from isn't, like when they're exporting, that they're, some legacy systems would, that for a long time didn't do anything with stereo interlead files, would do everything as mono files. But check that, but it seemed like that worked as expected. All right, so we see, where do we put chord pads into Cubase on Mac OS X? So we'll see kind of the bottom zone here. So if you don't have the bottom zone active, you could just click right here, and then you would see all of the chord pads become visible. So if we wanted to add an instrument track, if I don't do it wrong 3 times in a row, and now we could just say, okay, I have this, and then at that point we could, so right here in the bottom, you could just see the chord pads, and that's where you access it in OS X or Mac OS. All right. All right. So we see, is it possible to give a parameter of a plugin a random LFO to that parameter, like this allowed in Ableton, but I produce more and more in Cubase? So, all right, let's take a look. So I have an LFO kind of set up in a project here. Just find a project. Okay, so let's say I have, so say on this track I have an LFO that's driving the filter on the drums here. So I will just come over here and let's open up the audio channel for this. All right, so within the LFO here, we could set, so I'm not sure if it's the time that you want random. So let's say if I wanted this to be, so just within the LFO tool itself, we could have, so if I wanted that to be completely synchronized or just random, so you could try just, putting the random function in the LFO tool here. So let's say if I want to take this, and let's say it's going to be on this LFO, it's going to be channel 10 that's random. So let's say if I wanted to, so it's MIDI CC10 that's driving the LFO on this effect. And let's say if I wanted to randomize CC10, let's see if we could do it here on MIDI modifiers. Let's see if we can, but just see if there's another one that I could. So let's say if I want to take type is equal to MIDI CC. And let's make this CC10. Let's say value 1 is CC10. And let's see if we can get this to randomize. Let's say value 2. Let's say set to random values between 20, we'll say minus 20, and 20. So now, let's say I have this on. If I have the auto LFO, and then I have it going through a transformer. So right now it's going exactly like every 2 measures. But now I could take that LFO and run it through the transformer. And also just say we're going to take MIDI CC10 and then randomize it through here. So we could do different stuff like that as well through the MIDI plugins. So let me know if that's helpful, and you can play around with that, get it tweaked for your liking. All right, so we see Uno Memento has in Finland at 50 centimeters of snow. Good luck. All right, so we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales. All right, so we see Sounds by Timo. Why am I hearing a random, I guess, note probably, whenever I press any button, note key on Arturia Keylab Mark II? So, make sure, one, that you don't have that those buttons aren't assigned to different functions in a MIDI remote. On a particular MIDI track, one of the things that you could do is go to the MIDI inserts and go to the MIDI monitor and make sure that, whatever key you're hitting, that you see that correlate, so if I hit different keys on my controller, make sure that those keys are matching up, and you can see that, and if this isn't matching up, then it's going to be something in your MIDI controller that's not transmitting correctly. So that should give you some insight as to where to start looking for that. All right, so we have Almir checking in from Bosnia. Thanks for joining us today. And we have John Costigan. Says, may I please have a like? So everyone hit the like button for John Costigan. All right, so we have Alexander Schuker sending greetings from Germany. Thanks for being on today. All right, and we have Nick on as well. We have Michael. All right. All right, so kind of a follow-up. Can someone explain question? Can someone explain chord pads? How do we put new chord pads into Cubase on Mac OS X? I can't find the location. All right, so again, if we come to our chord pads, we can see our chord pads here. And if we wanted to go to the settings. If we wanted to go to the pad layout, we could say, okay, I want to see 2 octaves. But now if I wanted to just put chords on a chord pad, if you click just on the left-hand middle section, you can now just say, okay, I want this to automatically play back, the chords. Let's say I want to do it on this. So if I wanted to change the chords, I could just say. It's kind of a cool chord. Anyway, and if you wanted to change existing chords, just kind of click on it in the lower, on the center left-hand side, and then you could just add chords just like that. So again, make sure that you have the bottom zone active, and if you don't have that active, click here in the upper right-hand corner. So you see the bottom zone where you may see like the mix console. Click on chord pads, and you could set new chord pads. If you click on settings, you could also kind of change the pad layout. So if you want to see it as a grid, or if you wanted to see different elements with the chord pads and chord pad layouts, you could do so right there. All right, so we have Perry Michael Allen says, hi, I'm a friend of Perry Michael. Would you please run through the MIDI modifiers / inserts note expression, please? Okay, so let's look at MIDI modifiers. Okay, so if we wanted to come over to MIDI modifiers, this would allow us to, so I'm going to just select... So when you go to the MIDI modifiers, there's going to be different presets. So if I'm playing just a C, and let's say if I wanted to transpose, so still playing the same note, and we could transpose. We could also add or decrease velocities. We could randomize different aspects as well. So if I wanted to randomize, and we could have 2 different random values. So if you wanted to randomize the pitch, randomize the velocity, randomize the position where the note is placed, or randomize the length of notes, we could do those different elements directly right there. So that's how we could access the MIDI modifiers. So let's say the second part of the question. Inserts. So we have different types of plugins that could be set up for inserts. So if I have, let's say, a bass part, and I wanted this bass part to actually just have like an arpeggio, I could come right over here. So right now, and if I just play a chord, I could hold a chord down, as you see here. And then I can say, okay, I want this to be, but let's say I want the length to be quarter notes. And if I wanted this to go over 1 octave, so instead of just being kind of stuck, or if we wanted to have quantizer plugins, so we could just come over here, we could have MIDI control so that, we could set a particular MIDI CCs to kind of default values. And if we wanted to have a quarter, if we want to do micro tuning, quantizing, so all sorts of different kind of creative controls with that. All right, and last part of the question. All right, would you please run through note expression? So with VST3 instruments, what you're able to do with note expression is, so say if I wanted to come here, I'll just show it on this voice here. So let's say on this particular chords. Let's say I have 2 chords just playing back. And let me just turn off. All right, so let's say I just want to take this and let me just adjust. Just adjust the panning here real quick. All right, so I'm just going to have these 2 chords. So what note expression is going to allow us to do is to take these chords, and I'll just zoom in to make it a little more obvious. And I'm going to turn on this little icon here where we could just have this automatically double click opens the note expression editor. So right now the default state is when you double click, the note will get deleted. But if we want it to take like a particular note and have kind of controller based editing for these particular chords. Now generally if I did a pitch bend information is going to be actually for every note on that particular channel. If I adjust MIDI volume, it's going to be for every note on that particular channel. So if I go to note expression, what I could do now is just say, okay, I want to draw in tuning. So I'm going to select tuning, double click, and now I could take just this high note So now when we want to look at it, we could have the other notes not have pitch bend and this note have pitch bend. Or if I wanted this note to get louder, I could adjust my volume. So say, okay, I want this to. And on this note, I wanted to take panning. So I'm going to select panning. And I just want to actually just kind of draw in panning on, so that one note will pan from left to right, and on the second note, this note will pan from right to left. So without affecting the others. So now we listen to this. So that way we could have kind of independent note-based controller editing as opposed to being limited to the traditional MIDI parameters for where it's all going to be channel-based. All right, just in my time field, I'm about 41 minutes in, so I'm almost an hour behind. I'll try my best to catch up. So people want me to periodically check in. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to get the MIDI pattern quickly from an audio loop? You know, so when we do our audio extraction, it's only going to be for monophonic sources. So if you wanted to turn a drum loop into MIDI, it's, you know, there's nothing that really kind of does that automatically. But you can take like, you know, the kick drum and then be able to mimic that, or take like a monophonic melodic part, such as something like a vocal, and turn that into MIDI with very audio, but nothing that's going to take you know, extract all the different components into an audio loop. There's some programs that try, but it's a bit sketchy, I would say. All right, so we see spectral layers 1.8, how to isolate frequency. All right, so I think this will work in spectral layers 1. You could try, so let's say I want to come over and do my spectral layers. Okay, so, and now I want to select, and we'll do a rectangular selection. All right. So if you wanted to just isolate, only like particular frequency ranges. So then we could just choose to make it a new layer. So let's say as we're playing. Then you could kind of solo and isolate layers, but just come over here to like the rectangular selection. Then you could isolate frequencies just kind of that easily. So give that a try. All right, so we have a question from Soren. Greg says, I need to ask to hear your thoughts about it. Will a future version of spectral layers separate electric guitar, acoustic guitar, also backing vocals from lead vocals? Some of those could be, I imagine those would be tricky to isolate, especially if stuff is blended on the same frequencies. But there's a lot of really interesting, research and development going on in those areas. So, we'll have to see what comes forward with this. It's obviously kind of an exciting area of audio processing. So, and I know that the spectral layers will obviously kind of always be on the forefront of stuff like that. See, Chuck Strable just says taking the eggs out of a cake after it's baked. Great analogy. So, analogies are powerful. So. All right. So we have Daniela checking in from Constata, Romania. So thanks for joining us. Glad to see you on, Daniela. Hope you and your husband are well. All right. My chat field just jumped. All right, we have Kaiwan Franklin on. All right, so we see David and Kay just saying maybe John Barron, who's kind of my Dorico counterpart, should do a joint session sometime. So yeah, I'll have to coordinate it with John. Maybe we could do it in New Year. So that'd be a lot of fun. John's one of my favorite people. So. All right, so we see Daniela is celebrating a pre-Christmas, and they're soon going to Ukraine. So be safe, and we hope you have a wonderful holiday. All right, so just see from Sam Koo, how to quantify audio by cue. So I'm not sure if that's like cue as in like a cue point in, or like, so let's say if we're here. So I'm not sure if it's like, the... Like as we come here, if that's the cue you're talking about, where we kind of can spread in the EQ. But I'm afraid I may be misunderstanding. So maybe Sam Koo, if you could ask your question our way, or if someone else understands it better than I do. All right. So I just see from Patrick, just says, yes, Greg is already quantized, but if I copy velocity from one to the other while quantizing, it's moving places. I don't know why. So in the, make sure, Patrick, that you have when we're doing this, let's say with a MIDI event, just go to a different project here. Sorry. So when doing this, make sure that you have make sure that the velocity is set to 100% and position and length are set to 0. So make sure that the position is set to 0 as well. All right, so Michael Teams has been kind enough to grant my family and myself 1 gallon of hot buttered rum ice cream. It sounds like a wonderful Christmas edition. Thank you so much, Michael. And we appreciate everything you do for the... But I have to say that Kerwin's Kahlua Mocha also sounds quite good. All right. All right, so we have a question from OEW. Hi, Greg. What is the best way to select between the markers, cut and duplicate the selection while moving the rest of the song to the right? Okay, so let's say if I have markers that are set up, okay, so let's say I have marker here and a marker here. Okay, and I'm just going to take this, and we may have to just make sure we're not in a divided track list. All right, so I wanted to select between these two markers. So I'm going to grab the range selection tool and just double click between the two markers. And then if I wanted to come over here, we go to range, and then we could just say insert silence. And so it's Command or Control plus Shift plus E, and then everything kind of moves over to the right. So let me just reread that, make sure. So you want to cut and duplicate the selection while moving the rest of the song to the right. Okay, so let's say if we want to take this selection between these markers and duplicate, just hit Command or Control D. Let's see. Okay, so let's say I hit Command Shift E. All right, let me just... All right, so I'll just start from scratch because we want to duplicate. All right, so let's see if we change this to grid mode and all right, so let's try Command Shift E to give the space, and then you could, and then just grab that and hold down the Alt or Option key, and you could just make a copy. So again, if we want to take this, let's see if I put this in shuffle mode. If no. Okay, so try again. We'll just take this. I will insert silence, and then I could select between those markers, hold down Alt or Option, and just line it up just like that. So, but if you wanted to select all the space between markers, use the range tool on the marker track and just double click, then you could select kind of the whole range right there. So let me know if that's helpful. All right. So we see from Daja, I have the full license of Melodyne. Is there a way to change the default in Cubase so that it automatically launches that version rather than the light version that comes with Cubase Pro? So there isn't a light version of Melodyne that comes with Cubase Pro. So there was for a month of promotion, but it could be just when you go to the extensions, see if you see, the Melodyne Essential or whatever version it is versus Melodyne Studio, and select Melodyne Studio there. But it's just kind of handled as an extension. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button so that I'm gainfully employed. All right. All right, and we have Mark Rabin joining from Montana. We hope you're okay. It seems like there's a lot of snow up in the northern part of the U.S. there. Thanks for joining us, Mark. See John Costigan with follow-up to his question. It looks like user error again, so we're just happy that you're on the live stream and we're able to ask. All right, so we have a question from Alex Morgan. Hi, Greg. When using headphone mix in the control room, Media Bay has no sound. Could you advise how to fix this? Thank you. So try to go to Preferences. All right, so if you want to make the kind of like the preview and the control room stuff go through the headphones, go to, again, the Preferences and to Control Room. And then you'll see Use Phones Channel as Preview Channel. Make sure that that is checked and hit Apply and OK, and then you should be done. So once again, go to Preferences, Control Room, and make sure that Use Phones Channel as Preview Channel is checked. All right, great, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island. All right, so we see, hi Greg, saw your video, migrate channel settings across different projects. The save selected channels option in a mixer does only show up for audio tracks though. Any way to do this with instruments? So what you could do with, I think you could do it here. So let's say I have an instrument track. Okay. So let's say I'll add another one. We'll just add a Hallian Sonic SE. All right. Or I'll just go to, let's say if I'm, so let's say if I'm in I want to go to a different project. So I'm going to go to import. So I think in the mixer, it's going to be for audio tracks, but let's say if we go to import tracks from project, and let's say I wanted this to go to, so I'm going to select this. So say, okay, now I'm going to hit this, and now I could just select my different instrument tracks right here. And I could import those without events and hit OK. And then all the instruments with all their settings will be imported and carried over. So try again to just say import tracks from project. And then you could, once you're there, you can choose just to import the track data and not the events, or you could exclude automation or include those different elements right there. All right. So I just see from Sam Koo, what's in your control room? Looks like a split track. So I just have a lot of the things kind of open. So I have the inserts maybe open here, but you could have different tabs that can be opened and closed. So maybe I have some additional tabs open. All right. So I just see question from Fred Robinson. Do you guys find that since 12, Cubase takes ages to open projects compared to before? So I haven't really noticed that on my system. I think I was reading somewhere, maybe on a forum, that someone had found it, with particular plugins, or like it might have been like a contact thing, and then some of those were opening up slower, but maybe some other people might be able to share, but I haven't noticed any difference on my systems. All right, so we have a question. What's the best way to reset all EQ settings for multiple tracks at once? Okay, so I think if I go to this project, there's a lot of EQ on different tracks. So I'll just revert this. Okay, so let's say if I open up, let's say my large, so I have a number, let's just come here and I'll just put in a number of EQ changes across my various tracks. Okay, so let's say I want to select all of my tracks here. So just shift, select. I'm going to enable Q-Link. And let's go to channel settings here. And then I just wanted to come over here to load preset. I think there's a default. And looks like that didn't carry. Let me make sure everything was selected here. Okay, so with Q-Link, yeah, so now when I come over here, all the channels are selected, and I'll load a preset. We'll choose default. And it looks like that's only going to not carry over to all of them. All right, so let's say let's see if we could do it maybe in the project logical editor so we don't have to do it all at once. See, I think we could turn them all off if they're in Q-Link still. But let's see what happens if we... So if we turn them all off, but it doesn't look like... Come here... So if we kind of adjust them manually, which may not be the most ideal solution, it looks like kind of takes care of that, but I'll make a note of that to pass along to the team. So you might have to do it one by one. Sorry about that. All right, so we have a suggestion box. Maybe pass along to Steinberg about using multi-outputs in a rack or instrument. I understand why it is how it is, but an alternative method option to do multi-outs. So we can do multi-outs on instruments. So let's say if I wanted to add an instrument, so let's add a Groove Agent SE. And I will just come over here. So now that we do this, so we'll open up, we have one output. I'll select a drum. Let's send this to output 2. We see our output 2. Let's get a snare to output 3. And we'll say to output 3, and we'll see that this just grows. So let's say hi-hat. We'll send to output 4. So our hi-hat. So now every time that we come here, we'll see it in different mixers, but also are different outs. So instrument tracks can have multiple outputs already. So I think it was in 8.5. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So alternative method based on multi-outs per MIDI track would be helpful because, as you see, when instruments don't work and using multiple high-ends or groove agents, a waste of resources. So yeah, let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. But yeah, you can do multiple outputs on instrument tracks. Okay. All right. So see. Vincent just tuned in, so I guess I keep mispronouncing his name. So thanks for joining us, Vagalerin. All right, we'll just call him Vincent. Sorry about that. All right. All right, so we see from Fred Robinson, it says, same project as before, though I figure maybe it's Cubase now doing a license check back to its servers, which it didn't do before, as it was on a USB key. All fine once it's open, so it's not a big deal really. So Cubase doesn't really do a license check back to the server. So if you're totally disconnected from the internet, it doesn't do that at all. So. All right, so we have a question from Barry Goodman. It says, my Cubase AI keeps making copies of my projects. So is it maybe that you have, could be that there's a preference here. So if you go to general and just make sure autosave, so make sure autosave isn't turned on, but generally Cubase doesn't make copies of the projects, but a lot of times you may notice that there's different backup files that are auto-saved. Okay, so we have a question from Best Green Jesus. He asks, best way to copy a group of pads in Groove Agent to create custom kits. I've been doing it one at a time, so it could depend on if you are, doing it with kits that are, that are factory kits. They may be protected versus kits that are created by a user. So let's say if I wanted to come here, let me just cut the kit and I'll just create some quick drum samples in. All right, so say I want to come here. Okay, and I'll just randomly. Okay, so let's see if I. All right, and I'll just create a new instance of Groove Agent. So let's say copy pads. And I'll select all these, right click. All right, let's see if it's will allow me to paste within the instrument. All right, so let's see if we copy pads, we'll get to a different bank. All right, so let's see if we could do it to a different instance. Oh, didn't like that. All right. So it looks like you can, if you're just doing it within one instance of Groove Agent, that you have the ability to just copy the pads within that and paste just by right-clicking, copy and paste the pads. So. All right, so we see from Fetus Belt, please put Cubase again on sale for Christmas. I missed the 40% off in September. So yeah, I mean, we don't do 40% off promotions. We try to make it special, so it may not always be going on for like just for Christmas, but save up your money because there may be other promotions in the future. But I think Cubase is a great investment if you get a discount or not. All right, wonderful to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi from Big Tent in Nashville. Happy holidays to you both and your families. All right, so Vincent asks his question. When having an instrument open in Contact Player, is there a way to play the project without having to click on the project window with the cursor? So you should be able to, let's say I don't have Contact on this computer, but let's say if I come and I have an instrument open, and I don't, let's say this is my active window, I could still hit like spacebar to play and use the key commands to navigate, fast forward and rewind all directly while still having a different, so I don't have to click on the Cubase project window to play. I could just hit like the spacebar, and that should kind of take priority. All right, so we see question, can someone tell me where to look to troubleshoot setting up HX Native, I guess it's Helix Native, with Cubase elements, preferably video? So it's really, I think it's just a plugin, so you would probably just come over to Inserts, and then you would see, probably the line 6, it may show under Distortion, And at this point, we could just say, okay, open up the plugin right there. So once it's installed, it should just show up. Select an audio track and then go to Inserts. And at that point, just look for the particular plugin and you should be all set. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is going to a concert hall in the Netherlands. Sounds like fun. And he's going to try to steal an IR, so that'd be a good place to do it. All right, so we see from Odd Basic says yes, the performer logs out of the VST Connect session and gets the same message as well when he tries to reconnect. There should be some way to manually reset all the connections to server. So I will see if I can do some more research on it. I haven't had it crash on me when doing stuff, but and if you want to send me an email just as kind of a brain cramp reminder, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so as far as the questions go, we're just at about an hour and 18 minutes into it, so I'm going to try my best to continue to catch up. All right, so we see question from Vincent. Another question. Any way when importing WAV files from a customer to be able to make them match the track name? So if you want the, let's say if I do a new project, and I want to add, let me just import audio files here. So if I don't have any tracks selected, I'll just say, okay, I'm going to take these tracks and I import them and we put them to different tracks that the name of the file is automatically, the name of the track is automatically extracted from the file. So I'm just going to reread it and make sure. So yeah, so so let me know if that works for you, Vincent. So so it says I want to import several tracks in one go, not having to drag one by one file to the specific track, but to be able to import all at once and make them end up correctly in my template. So if I'm not sure if the names are following the particular template, if it's a template, so that would have to kind of manually be done. But if you're not working with a template, if you import the files, the names of the files would automatically carry over. So I'm not sure if you want to, rename, based on the track name. So I think the window has some stuff like that for that, but I don't think it's in Cubase, but maybe if you could specify, Vincent, that would be great. All right, wonderful to have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Okay, so Mac MFer just says, I cannot get Helix Native to work in Cubase. Everything is there, but no sound. The worst part is I'm new to this and cannot find anything pertaining to what I need. So if you're trying to play through the plugin in real time, so let's say we're here and you go and we go to the inserts and we see the plugin loaded up, but we're not hearing it. It could be that your audio interface, or when you go to your studio setup, that you're set for direct monitoring. So when the audio interface, or you have Cubase here set to direct monitoring, that's going to send the input signal directly to the output signal. And that will bypass any software plugins like your Helix or the VST Amp Rack. So make sure you're not in direct monitoring. And some audio interfaces, if you have like a 2-in, 2-out USB interface, you may have a knob that's like a mix. So maybe make sure that try to set that in the middle and see if you're able to hear. But if you have direct monitoring enabled on your audio interface, then make sure that's turned off. All right. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see from Patrick, Greg had helped. Can I sing some tunes and convert that to MIDI? If I do, does it play back correctly? So yeah, so it's just really, yeah. So it works, and you'll have different settings when you do the conversion to carry over like pitch bend data. If you sing in tune, that's obviously always the best solution. But if you don't necessarily sing in tune, and again to convert like a vocal that was sung in into MIDI, all you have to do is within the very audio editor. So we'll just say, okay, we'll come over here. And we'll see under functions, extract MIDI, and you'll have like different data for extracting with pitch bend data. So if you're going like, that could translate into MIDI. We could put onto an existing track or a new MIDI track. And at that point, you'll see your MIDI data lined up right there. All right, so we have a question. What's the difference when exporting using real-time export versus if we uncheck it plus the display mode while exporting? Is it hard on the CPU, and does it have any relation with the quality? So there's no difference in the quality. Sometimes some people like to have a real-time export just to monitor what's going on. Also, if you have external processing, external effects, or external MIDI instruments, that when you wanted to export those and have those included, that would have to be done in real time, but there's no quality difference. Some older systems would have to do real-time export because the audio would physically have to run through the DSP, and people thought that's what you needed to do to be pro. It was just kind of a limitation of the implementation of the DSP that it couldn't do it quicker than real time. So if you're doing an hour film, you had to wait an hour, which was kind of annoying, where Cubase and Nuendo could always do it faster depending on the processing load of your computer. All right, wonderful to see Paul Claridge on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. So let me just read it. How can I add a MIDI controller and MIDI remote if the vendor doesn't appear in the list? So really all you have to do, and I'll just make one here where the vendor doesn't appear in the list. So I'll just go ahead and delete this. So it doesn't really matter. So let's say I want to delete this. So I'm going to make a new MIDI controller. So we'll select vendor, and I'm just going to choose add vendor. So let's say I'm going to enter in Choi Sauce, which is my awesome little MIDI controller I have on my desk here. It's a Choi Sauce 100. I'm going to choose the MIDI in and out port. So here's my Choi Sauce 100, my Choi Sauce 100. And I'm going to create my MIDI control surface area. So I want to make just vertical faders, which mimics the Choi Sauce. So I move one fader, move the second fader, third, fourth, fifth, 6th, 7th, 8th. And now we could come over to our mapping assistant, and then I could map these all for different devices. So I say, okay, I want this to be like focus quick controls. So I'll just say, okay, I move this one. I want to assign this function. And then that's all set up. So now when I want to go back, we'll close this. When I want to go back to my controllers, that we could see all of my controllers. So here's my Korg Nano control, and here's my choice sauce that I just created. So you could just choose, it doesn't have to be a vendor that's on the list. It could be anything, really. All right, wonderful to see David M. on the live stream from Liverpool. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. I have a loop. I liked the kicks and hats, so I dragged to sampler, spliced it up, and made my own groove darge to MIDI. But I want to sample on separate channels. Need to pan them for mix. Can you show that? So I would do it inside of Groove Agent because that way you have multiple outs. So let's say I just want to come here to drum loops. Let's see if I can find. All right, so let's say I now want to come and let's add instrument track. All right, and now I just want to so at this point we could just say, okay, I want to slice. And then you could take each of these slices. So let's say, okay, it's this, and this slice are my snares. I could just come and we'll select these. Let me just hold down Control or Command. And let me just unsolo this real quick. So I'll just say Command, select, and I could now, when I go to main, send this to output 2, send these to output 1, output 7, whatever. So you could, so approaching it from starting in Groove Agent may make more sense. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see kind of further up follow-up question from Jeweler to Rocket. Thanks, guys. And it's about the real-time export, because when you have a huge project and you're checking real-time export, it will not go through. That means simply it uses lots of CPU. So it could be that maybe, when it doesn't play in real time means that the project is exceeding the CPU resources of your system. So, but again, there's no no sonic difference between the two. All right. All right, so we have a question from Walter Till. Hi, what is the best option when I want to move everything from a certain point, move really everything, marker tracks, automation, tempo changes, etc.? Thanks. Okay. Okay, so let's say we have a project. So let's say I will come here. So let's just add. Okay, so I'm going to, let's say we have tempo. I'm going to throw in some automation. All right, so number, let's drop in some markers. Okay, so what I want to do is when I go to edit, so let's just select all on my project. And I want to say that there's and I'll say global copy. And I just want to move my cursor here to measure 18. And then if you want it to paste, then all the automation, everything that was carried over can just be done. So try a global copy, and let me know if that makes sense for your workflow. So that way you can move everything. All right, so we see from RFB says my vendor is Akai Advanced 25. It is legacy. The point is this keyboard doesn't appear in the list. So even if your keyboard doesn't appear in the list, you could still make it work as long as it transmits MIDI. You can just create it just like I did just a couple moments ago with the Choy Sauce controller. So. All right, so we have a question from Jay at Secret Studios. So question one is it possible to use Beat Designer to pitch percussion in the step sequencer? If not, share step sequencer method. So, the step designer. So let me just come to this track here. So let's say the Beat Designer is really only going to play back, the actual notes, that are being sent to the particular drum sound. So like as we want it to play, so this will just play back whatever is in this particular instrument. So when we want to open up this instrument, so it doesn't necessarily take, like a particular sound and map it across. But if we put this onto, so let's say if I come to let's say I want to go to a Groove Agent library. All right, and I want it to take so let's say I want to take that kick and make a sampler track out of it. So now I will come here and we have this as our at this point, if I wanted to add a MIDI insert of the Beat Designer, we could make this more harmonic based. So let's say as we play. So it's kind of the same sound, but if I wanted to play higher, and this way you could take one sound and kind of have that be more harmonic based. So let me know if that's kind of, so any single sample, then you could kind of, pitch the percussion sound using the beat designer like that. All right. And I just see also Jay just wanting to request Calypso and I guess Soca Groove Agent patterns. Yeah, so make sure that, there are a number, check out if you have like the full groove agent, definitely check out the percussion agent because that could have all sorts of great Calypso type sounds. So let's say if we add, and this is in the full version of groove agent. So if I wanted to load a kit with patterns, and I'll just choose the percussion agent. So now if I just wanted to just play this, we could come over and this is following the tempo, and if you wanted to go to the pattern, there's different pattern kits that you can have, and you could change levels of complexity and change different elements. So if you haven't really dived into like the full groove agent, it's worth the upgrade just for the percussion agent alone. So if you want Calypso and different patterns like that, that will do it very easily. All right, so we have from 8-Bar Frenzy. What is the easiest question? What is the easiest way to tune an audio file kick drum to be in key? So if you wanted to take the kicks, and let's say, like I had a project where in a rock band, the drummer had his bass drum tuned to E flat for some reason. All right. But, an easy way of doing it is, let's say, okay, I want to take all the drums here. And let's say I want to take my kicks. So if I select those, then we could just go to transpose. And then you could just tune right here. So if you do have kind of clashing frequencies, just select it, and this will actually transpose the audio in real time straight from the info line. So again, you'll need to select the events, see the transpose function. You can use your mouse scroll wheel to increment and decrement up, and use your ears to listen to make sure that it's not conflicting frequency wise. All right. All right, so we have Fernando A. Gallegos has to take off, so thanks for joining. All right, so Jeweler DeRocket just says, I need to have a gain plugin. That's a start point for any project. What we have at the moment, just two options. I still feel it's missing that gain plugin, and this is just not a bad option to have. So again, there's like any number of plugins, just if you come over here to, if you need gain in the middle, you know, if you go to like the Studio EQ and just add gain, you know, there's probably 12 plugins that have a gain control that you don't have to utilize any of the parameters of the plugin to have gain. Plus you have gain on, you know, the input channel. You have gain on every single channel, 48 dB of gain there. You can put gain on any inserts here. So, so there's a lot of different options for gain. So, you know, I'll ask for a plugin that just adds gain if you want, but you know, there's a lot of stuff that you could do that already. Let me know if any of those won't work for a particular reason. I see Jazz Dude just says he's never had a problem gain staging in Cubase, no extra plugins needed. So I kind of feel the same way. But if there's a particular reason that, you know, if you wanted to, you know, put gain before compressor, you know, you could do it a number of different ways. All right, so Nick has to head off early, so we'll see you later. Thanks for joining us. We hope you're feeling better. All right. So I just see a question. Can we finally get a discount / sale for VST Connect Pro? I mean, come on, guys. We need to grab it. So, you know, take a look because there's always different promotions that are coming on. And I think VST Connect Pro has been in a couple times, but, you know, continue to look. Always look for, you know, current promotions that are going on. So. All right, so Patrick just asked, Greg, are you watching football match? So no, unfortunately I have to work and do a live stream, so I'm not watching it. So, but I did see Portugal and Morocco over the weekend. All right, so we see Lawrence Koch giving me, I think was it Lawrence Koch, like Ed Koch, the mayor. So, but we'll call you Lawrence, so I don't have to mispronounce your name. Sorry about that. All right. All right, so all right, so we see Stella, Mark Rabin's dog, is going to the doggy park, so that's good. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer on the live stream. All right, and we have Al Lee checking in from Vienna, where it's a cold, snowy Vienna. All right. All right, so we see a question from Patrick. It says, Greg, if I want to send you my music, where and how can I send? So you could just send a link to, and I think Ubikun had also asked about this, but you could just send me a link to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de. All right. So you see from Patrick, question, Greg, I was arranging track and arrange track, but once I select filter, new arrangement option, but arrangement track gone away. If I want to see that again, how do I do that? Do I have to add a new track? So let's say if we're here and we add an arranger track. Okay. So let's say we have different components here. All right, so I'm not sure if when you said you had it filtered, if you had it just filtered from view right there in invisibility. So let me know if that's what happened, Patrick. All right, so Fred Robinson, all right, so he just, about the range selection question, so he just says, let's say if we select range here, so he just said just to copy, then do Shift plus Command V, like paste. I may have to be out of. So I think he just said copy, and this is our earlier question about copying, adding space. So and then so copy with Command or Control C, and then Command plus Shift plus V. Okay, yeah, that's a great solution. Thanks for inserting at times. So if we wanted that, so if I wanted to take this, just Command C or Control C, and then Command plus Shift, Command or Control plus Shift plus V, and that will knock the other parts over. Thanks for that, Fred, for helping me with my brain cramp. Let's see, Kerwin Young likes his Kahula Mocha. So I think I may have given Kerwin one of his first mochas when we got together when he was visiting DC over the summer. So it was a lot of fun to see Kerwin. All right, so we have Paul Beck just saying hello, and Randy Lee from Texas. All right. All right. So you see a question from Patrick. I saw in some video in Control Room. He's having span, VST, and reference tracks. Some more things show how to do that. In fact, your Control Room looks busy. How to set up stuff so on Control Room, make most out of it. So, you know what I've done on my Control Room, just for demonstration's sake, is when I go to my audio connections into my Control Room. At this point, I have like different external inputs. I have 4 different Q mixes set up, 4 different monitors for demonstration purposes. If you wanted to come over here, you could have inserts on different parts. So if you want inserts on particular monitors or inserts on the Control Room, and these inserts will be used to modify only the monitoring source and not applied into the particular signal. So you could do that. As far as using kind of a reference, let me just open up a project with that. I think I was the first one to kind of started doing this, and everyone started doing tutorial videos on it, kind of copying it way back when. But let me just open up a project. I could show this. Open up one of my friend Clay Oswald's projects. All right, so if you wanted to have like a reference track, so what I've done is basically created a separate reference track as a Q mix. So when I want it to come over to my control room, so basically a lot of times when people are using references, they may have basically different plug-in processing. So if you take another audio file in the system, all of a sudden then you're processing a master track through your master section. It's not a good reference. So in this, let's say I wanted to use this track as a reference. And let's say on this track, I'm just going to EQ it awfully, just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to this track and go to my Q send, and I want to send this to a Q send, and I'm going to send it at 0 dB. All right. And on its output source, instead of going to the stereo, I'm going to choose no bus. All right. So when I play back a project, I'll come here. Now, so this track is our reference track. It isn't being routed through our master area. So I can play back my project here. And then when I go into my main, I can say, let's go to Q mix 1. So we can say, okay, let's come over here to so this is my mix, my reference track. This is my mix here. So say that's my reference. And now I could just go back and forth between my mix and a track that's a reference track that's not going through here, but is only going through this Q. So that's just one of the, many amazing things that you could do inside of the control room. So incredibly powerful. All right. All right. So we have Bruce Bruton just asked, is it possible to convert an audio track to MIDI? So, if it's going to be a monophonic source, such as, taking the vocal here, and let's say, okay, we want to go to our editor. So let's say, okay, I now want to come over here. Let's go to Very Audio. And if we wanted to edit the Very Audio, we could now take like that monophonic source and be able to, extract it to MIDI. We could take based on like an impulse, maybe like a kick drum, and we could convert that into MIDI as well. We can figure out the chords from tracks, but it's not, quite so easy to immediately take something and convert it into MIDI from like a stereo mix file. So the technology isn't quite there yet. Okay, so you see Best Korean Jesus just indicating he's trying to move page 4 to page 3 of the same or different instance, kind of confusing. All right, so let's just jump back to different project here, and this is with the Groove Agent. Okay, so let's say I will. All right, so let's say I have. And let me me set my control room correctly. So say I want to take these sounds and let's copy pads. Let's go to, don't have any sounds here. I'm going to select the pads and paste pads. So maybe if you might have to, yeah, even if you don't select them, it will just kind of automatically increment. So let me know if that's helpful, Best Green Jesus. So you see a question from Fred Robinson, and this question comes up frequently, but is there a replacement for the CC121 hardware controller coming out anytime soon? So I haven't seen anything announced. I haven't seen anything kind of on roadmap. So and that was, constructed by Yamaha. So, we would love to see one come out. I'm not sure what, I haven't seen anything on the plan, so don't hold your breath on it. But I think, with, as Best Green Jesus said, with the new MIDI controller, you could, simulate a lot of the functions of a CC121 in just about any device that you wanted to. All right, wonderful to see Jeff Zabelski from Chico, California. And on the questions, I'm at about 2 hours and 24 minutes in. So maybe about 30 minutes behind. All right, so we see Brian just asking, anybody know where I can find a map for a World Panda MIDI controller? I spent all day yesterday trying to make my own, but I really don't get it. So yeah, I've never even heard of that MIDI controller, but maybe someone else has. See, Suspicious Sound says, I'm the only Cubase user at college. I'm on my own when I have issues. Well, you're part of the Club Cubase live stream, so you're not really on your own. So you get all sorts of great support here. All right, so we see from Vincent on an import question we discussed earlier. I have a template with named tracks, routing's done, group tracks done, everything. Perhaps this has to be done manually, but I would like to import several tracks in one go, and I want Cubase to place them on the correct tracks with name matching. Perhaps it's not possible. And it says, if this isn't possible, this is a request for me to Cubase. So I'll make sure to pass it along. But there could be all sorts of other things like, if you have different tracks, but let's say you have, bass 1, bass 2, bass 3, bass 4, bass 5. Do you want those to all go onto bass, or do you want those all to go to match the exact file name, like where there's only one file per track? Because that may not work with templates as well. So there's a lot of other variables with that. All right. All right, so I just see a question from Hugo Stiggs. Do you think we could get a note repeat in the sampler track we can use with the mod wheel? So, there are, let's say if I wanted to come over to let's say if I have, let's see if we could do this with like a MIDI plugin. So let's say, okay, so let's say I want to create a sampler track with this. One of the things you may be able to do is, let's say we have our, but check out if you wanted to come to MIDI inserts, you could do stuff also like a note repeat here. So if you go to, is it MIDI delay? MIDI echo, sorry. So if you wanted to, so if you wanted to do stuff like this, maybe if you want to utilize, maybe, utilizing different note repeat, the MIDI echo plugin. So say, again, if you wanted to, and then you could actually use your mod wheel, or if you wanted to just change kind of the delay time. So let's say, okay, I want this to be straight 16ths. So, and if I wanted to go to quick controls here, I could go to my MIDI inserts. Let's say I wanted my fader to control my delay value. So I'll hold down control and click. So I say, okay, let's go to my delay time. I'm going to click on learn here. Let's go to my delay time. And I'll just right click, keep this on top. So now, so let me just click on learn for this. So see if you actually, experiment with like your MIDI echo plugin on the sampler track, if that will get you there as well. And if you have the full Groove Agent version, there's kind of note repeat directly inside. All right, so a question from Brian. If your device had a keyboard, how do I make that work? I got the buttons and sliders working, but can't figure out how to get the keyboard going. So a lot of times, make sure. So I'm not sure if you're using it just as a standard MIDI controller. So it should automatically, see if you have like the MIDI control going on there, but you should be able to, as long as it's communicating via MIDI, make sure that on the MIDI input that, it's set to all MIDI inputs. And if that doesn't work, try setting exactly where your keyboard controller is working. But if it's kind of controlling, so I'm not sure if you want to control the keyboard to play sounds or the keyboard to actually do particular functions in the MIDI remote, if you could let me know. All right, so we have Thomas Zivor says, checking in from Prague, Czech Republic. Love your software. I have a question. Would it be possible to add the function of a vertical zoom using mouse wheel and function key, same as horizontal zoom? Yeah, so I just kind of, asked for that again. So hopefully maybe we'll see it coming in the future. So I'm not sure why it's not in now, just hasn't been implemented. But I'll make sure to check it again. All right. So the question, hi Greg, is there a way to test the VST Connect? I tried to do it at home, but I got an error message saying it was on the same network. Is it possible to find other random users to connect? Thanks. So you could probably, if you wanted to check, forget who is asking about like VST Connect, but I'm sure that other people, if there's anyone that wants to do VST Connect, maybe you could just leave your email or get in touch with, is it Tanchi or Tanch 012? But yeah, if you have the VST Connect Pro, you could do it within the same network. But the VST Connect SE, you'd have to be on a different network. All right, so we see, does hit point quantize time even after Melodyne has transferred tracks? So I think it would be independent. So I think, once the track is back in, that you could then quantize the audio, but you could always, if you've done any type of, editing with like an ARA2 extension. So let's say, you open up spectral layers, and this example will be, very similar concept, but if you wanted to, within the editors, just to make the track extension permanent, you could do that, and then there shouldn't be, but I think that it would be independent, but I'm not a Melodyne user, so I do everything in Very Audio. All right, so we have a question. Hi, when dragging an audio wave clip on top of another audio wave, I want to be able to see through the top layer. This helps me align audio waves. Can Cubase do that? Okay, so let's say I want to take a different drum loop here. Okay, and I'm just going to change the color of this event so that we could. All right, so let's say once we do this here, let me just see if I can find. All right, so now that we do this and we have events that are overlapping, so let me just see if it's. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and we go to, let me just turn off. So, once I'm in the sample editor, we could choose to see all clips. So we could say show only the active clip. Or within the sample editor, we could say show all clips. So now that if both of these are selected, we can now just kind of align these and see them. Like, so if I wanted to just, both of those are selected, we can see those together to edit accordingly. So if I wanted to come here and slip the audio and use one as a reference point on another to line up beats, you could do it like that in the sample editor. But you can see that they're kind of overlapping, but you get a better perspective in the sample editor. All right, so we see a question from Brian. I'm shopping for a big DAW, currently using iOS GarageBand, very simple and intuitive. I'm leaning toward Cubase because the videos really seem to help. As a newbie, the DAW learning is painful. It's not painful. Just think about it. You don't have to do every single function in the DAW to start with. But know that with Cubase, every function that you'll ever need is in there. So, and think of it like, when you sat down at guitar or piano, you didn't, your first day you didn't play Chopin. You didn't play, Eric Johnson's tracks the very first day. You kind of build up to it. So, just take one step at a time, and then you can get a lot done without having, learn exactly what you need to learn to get something done. But, this is a wonderful resource for, to learn, and, that way you can get your questions answered as you hit them. All right, so Valley wants people to hit the like button. All right, so Brian also asked, is everyone using this level DAW recording engineer where you have to record artists? It seems so tough, and I'm not sure I work in a machine and be creative at the same time. So, it's, people will do whatever. Sometimes you're recording friends, sometimes you're recording clients, sometimes you just want to work and, capture your own creativity, and you're able to do all of that easily with Cubase. So. All right, so I think I'm at the end of the questions. I think I finally caught up. I know we had questions that were sent in, so let me jump to those. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. All right, give me a second. All right, so we had this question on the last live stream. I said I would do some more research on it. I kind of figured it out. And the question was, how to colorize MIDI data best on the articulation colors from the expression map. Okay, and I had kind of a brain cramp on this last time. Okay, so let's say we have our parts here. All right, so say so we see that the notes are, and this is our violin part. All right, and so when we go to our expression map setup, we can see that we're going to have for violin 1 that will have a number of different articulations, and these articulations will have different colors. So we know that when we go to pizzicato, that it's going to be kind of green. When we go to trills, it will be red. When we go to legato, it's going to be also kind of a greenish color. So what we can do, and I thought that it was changing the colors here that would color carry over, but if we go to our color scheme and set sound slot, so now let's say I take my violin and I wanted that to go to spiccato, the notes themselves here change, not the articulation edit. So we come and we can say, okay, now I want it to be legato here. So these will stay the same colors, but the notes themselves change. So if I now wanted to take these notes as pizzicato, when I enter in pits, so let's say we put in pits here, that these notes, and this is more subtle, but as we would just put in our different notes, the notes themselves will change as opposed to these particular colors. So these change, but you have to have the color scheme set to sound slot. All right, we also had questions that I had a brain cramp on last week on it was a question about MIDI functions for delete overlaps mono and delete overlaps poly. So let's take a look at those. Okay. I'll just show it on a different project here. Okay, so let's say I have notes here. All right, so let's say I have a note here, and let's say as I drag a note on top here, so let's say I want to do a monophonic. So right now we would have a note that is still underneath. So when we're in the key editor, if I wanted this note to delete, I select both of the notes, and let's say I'll drag this over, let's say starting to like the fourth beat there. So now when I go to MIDI and go to functions and we say delete overlaps mono, that event, that single note was cut out. So again, once I undo that, so once I move this note starting right here, that will take the end of that note and delete it, but you have to have both notes selected. So again, come over to MIDI and functions to delete overlaps mono, and now that note ends where we dragged it. And polyphonic does something very similar, just for polyphonic notes. So if I have these dragged over, let me just... So now if we do the same thing with chords, and I could just go to MIDI to functions, delete overlaps, poly, and now when I move these notes to the right, we'll see that the previous notes will just end right where we were. So. All right, so I had a question. Could you show a way how to program a macro? Let's say import a specific audio file, it puts it on its own track, named correctly, and insert at origin. That would be a real time saver. So there's not a macro way of doing this because there's a couple of settings that would need to happen as you're doing the macro, but it's pretty easy. So let's say I want to do a new project and I wanted to, import, and these files may not have kind of an origin time, but I'm going to start blank, and we're going to say new import audio file, and so let's say I want to import these files here. All right, so now I'm just going to say we're going to put them onto different tracks. The name has carried over directly to all the events. Then you could just select all, and at this point, and these probably don't have an origin time, you could just say, so you could do it as a two-step process, but now when you go to edit, you could just say move to origin, and that would place it at the correct timestamp. So it's not a macro, but I think you could do it pretty fast. Just if you start with no tracks, the name of the file is carried over, and then, it's a matter of basically two different steps for that. All right, and then we had this from Jackshot Records, and this is about doing fades. So let me see if I could show this on a particular track. All right, and let's say that I've done different edits across here where we'll have different files. Okay. All right, so it says, I'm more of a songwriter than an engineer, so I've been working to streamline my workflow using different key commands, macros, and controllers and self-designed touch services to give me fast, small-brained songwriter-specific workflow solutions to keep the creative juices flowing. When I'm editing and cleaning up and comping my session, I can end up with a whole mix of different size events on different tracks and different size events on the same tracks. It's a real mixed bag sometimes. I either have to make fade in, fade outs as I go for each edit. Preference is not to stop the flow of editing, cleaning, or go back to the end and make sure to do it for each one before ultimately bouncing them all for a nice clean project. What I was hoping to do is build macros so that when I select a bunch of different length and placement of events, or even just a whole project, I wanted to be able to add the fade in, fade out via macro, which would be set at a time of 0.00.00.006, for example. Very subtle length is for that many slices of events. I won't have a pop or a click, but I won't have to worry about how far in front of the waveforms I've sliced, whether or not the fade in, fade out will cut off any information I plan to keep. And the macros I have in mind was successful by hitting the shortcut a second or third time. It would just add the same length fade in to all the selected events again, combined as I continue to hit the shortcut. I found a way of doing this with the quantized values, disruptive to my workflow. All right, so with this, one of the things that could help in this particular workflow, especially like when you're comping, Cubase does have an auto fade setting, and this is not, we don't necessarily see this, enabled. We don't, when we see the fades, these are just kind of playback fades. Because I think the ultimate goal is, as you do different comps and edits, that you don't want to hear any unintended little clicks or pops because of an edit. So what this will do is anytime that you have this checked, we can just activate auto fades on a particular track. And what this will do is basically just, as soon as this is activated, it can add a short, like 10 millisecond or 6 millisecond fade in, fade out, or crossfade anytime that the audio plays. So if you do all sorts of edits, instead of having to manually move different, fades manually where you're physically editing them, try just to come over here and just enable the auto fades. And again, this is on playback, so it's not really edited, but I think that this will get you to where you want to go very fast for the editing so that you don't hear clicks and pops. And you could just enable that on the track. And I think that will free up a lot of your time editing. So let me know, play around with that and let me know if that works for you. All right, so I think that's all the questions that were mailed in. So thanks for all the great questions from everyone. If you did learn a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. Let me just go back to our real-time questions. All right. All right, so we have Eric Douglas DuPaul checking in from El Salvador. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have Pablo has made it today. So wonderful to see Pablo from Galicia, España. All right. See, Jeff Sabelski's listening as he's warming up for the Bach double concerto for oboe and violin. All right, so we see from Vincent says, only if you have time, Greg. So yes, the basic idea of importing thing is to have a template that has all potential tracks for the next upcoming project. When I import the WAV files, the idea is that the files find their matching tracks. I don't need to import one file at a time individually to the designated track. I want the template, so I don't need to route group for new project. I'll play around with a bit with the project logical editor, so we might be able to select events with particular names and then select a name, select a track with a name, and then maybe move all of those events in time. So I'll play around with before Friday to see if maybe there's a way in a project logical editor that doesn't necessarily have gotchas with different naming conventions. But yeah, I understand what you want to do. All right, so we see from Alexander Schuker, hi, is there a way to set the input channel from the interface quick, for example, recording drums, greetings from Germany? So as, tracks are added, you could, just come over here and so let's say we have inputs, but as you add tracks or, if you wanted to come, so let's say we add an audio track here, we could set the input. So let's say if we set, and we could set the input. Now, if you want to do it for a number of tracks, one of the things you could do is just come over here and hold down Shift. And I think this will automatically increment the different outputs. So if you want to set input, so at this point, you could just switch the inputs accordingly. So if you wanted to increment the inputs, you could also have different track presets as well. So a number of different ways. Like if you have like the old Steinberg MR816s, which is like the original Firewire interface from Steinberg, you could actually hit a button on the interface and that would set the input for the channel. But that's the only interface I know that actually has that. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. I think we're at the end of questions. See Vincent just say, awesome, thanks for your apologies for any inconveniences. It's not an inconvenience at all. So we always love trying to find solutions. But there's a lot of other little gotchas with, file names and should be file name contains this and put it to particular tracks. So, but I'll play around with it some more and see if I get a workflow that makes sense for different gotcha scenarios. All right, let me see if there's any other questions coming in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. Thanks for all the wonderful questions from everyone. All right, so we see question, how do I expand a MIDI drum editor? Okay, so all right, I'll just go here. All right, so let's say I'll just come here. So if I have my MIDI drum editor here and I want to see it full screen, I could just kind of click and I could see all the different, I could go full screen with my MIDI drums. All right, so we see, it says question, how do I expand a MIDI drum editor? Can I send you a video of my question? Sure, you can send a link to the video to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, but can I expand the beat? So, as we come over here, let's say if I add different elements, now that as soon as we come here, you may have to expand, we could think of, the event, as, we have an event as the container for the data, but you could just expand it directly on the main project window. All right, so we see from Pablo, question, is there a way in the project view without having the inspector open to lower the volume of a track? Okay, if you don't have the inspector open, which is always a good thing, I think, and if you have like a quick control that's set for a track, so like right now, let's say I wanted to go to my MIDI remote here, and so I wanted to control, let's say, the quick controls for the selected track. So I go to the mix console. Let me just do it with, let's create a new project here. So if you have like your quick control set up, so I'm going to, so let's say on this track, I just want to activate, let's say my quick controls. All right, so let's say I have those activated for 1 through 4, so I hide my inspector so I could still, whatever tracks I have selected, I could adjust the volume with quick controls. I could adjust the volume on my mixer, but if we don't have the lower zone, whatever tracks that I have selected here on my project window, I could just have the quick control automatically control without having the particular, and if I close this window and I just have it open for demonstration purposes, I can move one fader and that will just control the particular volume on that selected track without the inspector open. So let me know if that works for you, Pablo. All right, so you see, what's the email to send you the question? So you can go to Club Cubase, just like the name of the live stream, at steinberg.de. So Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Vincent says, referring to my question when I asked about being able to play the project with contact open, it seems like it's a contact thing, specifically with GGD invasion, perhaps a contact issue. So yeah, maybe it's just kind of taking control. So, all right, so you see from Quentin S, he just sent it, so I probably won't get a chance to look at it until after the live stream. All right. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that kind of pop up. If not, we'll wrap up just a little bit early. I may be a little later tonight with the index because I have to help my son study for a math test as my wife is working a little bit late and make dinner for him and all that good stuff. So, see, Pablo just thinks the quick controls is brilliant, and he always forgets about the quick controls. They're so handy in so many ways. So. All right, we'll see if there's more questions sneaking in. If not, we will go ahead and wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for the great questions. Well, again, we'll be doing this on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And then our last live stream for the year will be next Tuesday. So I may have to jump on a meeting during our normal Zoom time. I was planning on doing a Zoom, but I just got called into a meeting. But hopefully I can see if I can get out of the meeting so we could do kind of a Christmas Zoom get up, or normal Christmas Zoom meetup rather. All right, so wait another like 10 or 15 seconds and see if any of our questions come in. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. And once again, thank you for all the wonderful questions. I hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And if this is your first time to the live stream, welcome. And we hope to see you back so we could help you with more questions in the future so that you could be a better, smarter Cubase user. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy. And we will talk to you soon. Take care.